The road twisted like a serpent through the pines, mile after mile of forest that grew denser with every passing turn. The sky, once bright and cloudless, now wore a dull gray coat that seemed to press down on the earth. The McKinley's beat-up Ford Explorer crawled up the hill, its tired engine groaning against the weight of the trailer it pulled behind. Ethan McKinley glanced at the GPS one more time. The signal had died 20 minutes ago, leaving the screen frozen with a blinking arrow pointing into nothing. "Almost there," he said, more to himself than to his wife. Laura sat quietly beside him, her eyes following the trees, her fingers nervously tapping the armrest. In the back seat, 9-year-old Ellie was humming to herself and drawing foggy shapes on the window. She had never seen so many trees before. "Daddy," Ellie asked suddenly, "why did we move here again?" Ethan kept his eyes on the road. "Because we needed a fresh start, sweetheart. And because this house was free." "It was inherited," Laura corrected flatly, not looking at him. "Same thing." The house, as Ethan had explained many times, had belonged to his Uncle Gerald, a man neither he nor Laura had spoken to in over a decade. The man had been a recluse, living out his final years in a remote village in Pennsylvania called Wolf Hollow. No one really remembered much about him except that he used to send strange letters during the holidays, cryptic messages written in sprawling cursive, referencing the Watchers and the Moonlit ones. Most of the letters had gone straight to the trash. Now the keys to his old house sat in Ethan's jacket pocket, and the McKinleys were starting over in a place where no one knew their names. As they rounded a final bend, the trees abruptly parted to reveal a clearing, and the village. Wolf Hollow was like a fragment of another time. It consisted of a handful of sagging buildings, weather-beaten homes, a boarded-up post office, a chapel with a broken steeple, and a general store whose wooden sign dangled from one rusted chain, creaking in the wind. There were no stoplights, no gas stations, and not a single soul in sight. "It's quaint," Laura said slowly, masking her dismay. "It's like a postcard from 1930, Ethan replied with forced cheer. They passed the general store and turned down a gravel path that led into the woods. Uncle Gerald's house sat at the very edge of the village, surrounded by trees so tall they swallowed the last rays of the sun. The house itself was 2 stories high and constructed of faded gray wood. The windows were shuttered. Ivy clung to the stone foundation like old scars. Ethan parked in front of the porch and they all sat in silence for a moment. Then Ellie said, "I don't like it here." Ethan laughed nervously. "It's just different, honey. We'll get used to it." Inside, the house smelled of mildew and something older, something like burned herbs and stale air. The furniture was covered in white sheets. Every corner was filled with shadows, and the floor groaned under every step. The cellar door had 6 rusty locks on it. The attic had been nailed shut from the inside. They chose not to explore that first night. Later, while Laura unpacked in the kitchen and Ellie played on the porch, Ethan decided to introduce himself to the townsfolk. He returned to the general store, now occupied by an old man who sat on a splintered bench outside, smoking a cigarette with trembling fingers. "Evening," Ethan said. "Name's Ethan McKinley. We just moved into the house on Cedar Lane." The old man squinted up at him, one eye milky with cataract. "Gerald's kin?" "Yeah. Nephew." The man exhaled smoke and looked toward the forest. "Should have stayed gone." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You came at the wrong time," the man rasped. "Full moon tonight." Ethan looked up at the sky. Indeed, the moon was already beginning to rise, fat, white, and unnaturally bright. "Is that a problem?" Ethan asked, trying to smile. The old man didn't return it. "People here stay indoors on full moon nights." "You'll learn." "Why?" The man stared at him for a long time. "Because those nights don't belong to us. They belong to others." Ethan waited for more, but the man just turned away as if he'd already said too much. That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. The moonlight streamed through the cracks in her curtains, casting long fingers of light across her bedroom floor. The forest outside groaned and rustled. Somewhere, far off, an owl hooted, and something else answered. Not a wolf. Not a coyote. Something lower. What? Gurgling. She turned to the window. At first, she saw nothing but her own reflection. Then, slowly, a shape emerged just beyond the tree line. A small figure. No taller than her. It stood perfectly still in the clearing, face hidden in shadow. She blinked. The figure stepped forward into the light. It was a child, but not quite. Its limbs were long and crooked, like twigs bent in the wrong direction. Its skin gleamed faintly under the moon, pale as bone. Its eyes were too wide, too bright. It was smiling. Ellie scrambled back in her bed and pulled the covers over her face. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Her voice had abandoned her. When she finally dared to peek again, the figure was gone. She didn't tell her parents. She didn't think they'd believe her. The next day was cloudy and quiet. Ethan tried to be productive, fixing a loose window in the living room. Laura was in the kitchen trying to air out the smell of the house. Ellie sat on the swing that hung from a low branch near the edge of the forest. A soft wind stirred the leaves. "Ellie," came a voice from the woods, soft like a whisper carried on the breeze. She looked up. No one was there. But then she saw movement. A shape ducking behind a tree. Then another. Laughter high-pitched and echoing. Childlike but wrong. Curious, she stepped down from the swing and walked toward the trees. "Ellie?" Laura called from the porch a moment later. "Come inside now." But Ellie was gone. By nightfall they were searching. They combed the woods with flashlights, calling her name, their voices growing more frantic with each hour. The villagers didn't help. Most stayed indoors with their windows shut tight and their doors locked. "She went out during the full moon?" asked the old man from the bench when Ethan banged on his door. "Have you seen her?" The old man just shook his head. "She's with them now." "With who?" He lit another cigarette. "The children of the Moonlight." Ethan's blood ran cold. "What the hell are you talking about?" "They come when the moon is full. They take what was once theirs. You'll never see her again, not the way you remember." The door shut in Ethan's face. And somewhere in the woods, under the glowing eye of the full moon, small pale figures danced between the trees, laughing, whispering, watching. One of them had Ellie's eyes. But they no longer looked human. The hours blurred together as Ethan and Laura searched through the forest, their calls for Ellie growing hoarse and desperate. The night had become oppressive, thick with a suffocating stillness, as if the very air had turned to stone. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig underfoot seemed to echo impossibly loud in the silence. Ethan's flashlight beam sliced through the dark, casting long, wavering shadows that danced across the trees. The moon was high now, full and unnatural, casting a silver sheen that painted the forest in an eerie, otherworldly light. It wasn't just the brightness, it was the way the light seemed to linger on every surface as though it was feeding off the land, twisting it into something wrong. "Ellie." Laura's voice cracked as she called out. She sounded hollow, as though the forest had already swallowed her hope. Ethan gripped his flashlight tighter, his knuckles turning white. The search had gone on for hours. How long had it been? Time felt like it had been warped under the moon's gaze. The world around them seemed to pulse, to breathe with an energy they couldn't quite understand. Suddenly Ethan froze. At the edge of the clearing, something shimmered in the moonlight. "Did you see that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible, like the air around them was thickening. Laura stopped in her tracks. Her breath caught in her throat. I don't know." It was movement. Not like an animal or a bird, too fluid, too deliberate. And it wasn't a person. Not a normal person. Ethan took a hesitant step forward, his heart pounding. He could feel a strange pressure in his chest, as though the very ground beneath him was shifting, pulling him deeper into something unknown. Another flicker. The shimmer was gone. But something remained. The sound, soft, faint like a giggle. It was high-pitched, almost childlike, but twisted. A noise that had no business coming from the woods. The kind of laughter that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. "Ellie?" Laura called out again, her voice trembling with fear. Then another sound, louder this time. A whisper, one that seemed to move with the wind, curling around them, slipping into their ears, chilling their very bones. "Come and play with us." Ethan spun around. His flashlight's beam bounced erratically as he looked for the source of the voice. His stomach churned. Nothing. Just the forest, shifting under the moon's gaze. "Ellie?" he called again, louder now, but the word felt hollow in the oppressive night air. He could feel his mind fraying, his thoughts slipping away as if he were sinking into quicksand. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw them. At first, it was just a flicker, a pale shape darting between the trees. Too fast to be human, yet too wrong to be anything else. His heart leapt into his throat, and before he could stop himself, he moved toward it. "Ethan, stop." Laura grabbed his arm, pulling him back with surprising strength. He jerked away from her. "We're close. She's out there." "I know it." Laura's face was pale, her lips trembling. "No, Ethan, this isn't just some lost child. This place, it's wrong. It's them." "Who?" Ethan demanded, his voice rising. "Who's out there, Laura?" The words tumbled from her lips before she could stop them. "The children. The ones from the Moonlight." They take children. They take them in. The ground beneath them seemed to shift, a tremor that ran through the earth and shook their very souls. The trees around them groaned, their branches creaking as if they were alive, stretching toward them. Ethan felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise, an overwhelming sense of dread flooding his veins. "We need to go," Laura whispered, her voice barely a breath. "We need to leave. Now." But it was too late. A shape appeared in the clearing. A child. No, not a child, something else. The figure was small, barely the size of a human child, but its limbs were far too long. Its skin shimmered under the moon, a pale, almost translucent hue. Its eyes were wide, too wide, gleaming with a sickening brightness that seemed to pull the light from around it. It stood still for a moment, watching them with a hunger that sent a wave of nausea through Ethan's gut. Then it spoke. "Come and play with us," it said again, but this time the voice was not just a whisper. It was loud, echoing through the trees, bouncing off the very air. Ethan's body went cold. The thing's mouth twisted into a grotesque smile, too wide, too unnatural. The smile stretched and pulled as though it were an expression forced onto its face, like it wasn't meant to be there. "No," Ethan breathed, backing away slowly. "No, you can't have her." The figure took a step forward, its long, spindly limbs moving in a way that was both unnatural and too fast. Its feet made no sound on the ground, and with each step, the forest around them seemed to shudder, as if the very air had grown heavy. "We already have her," it hissed. Then from the darkness of the trees, more shapes emerged. At least a dozen of them. All pale, all with those same two wide eyes and twisted smiles. They moved together like a single writhing mass, their steps too quiet for their number, their giggles blending into a cacophony of madness. Each one appeared to be a child, but there was nothing childlike about them. Nothing human. "Ellie!" Laura screamed, her voice breaking. The shapes stopped moving. In an instant, their heads turned toward her, their eyes gleaming with malicious joy. "Ellie," the one in front hissed again. It wasn't Ellie, it couldn't be. It was just a thing wearing her face, twisting her name. Ethan felt his knees buckle. His head swam. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. The creatures closed in. And in their wake, a darkness seemed to stretch, like a tangible, suffocating fog that began to choke out the moonlight, swallowing everything in its path. "Please?" Ethan cried out, his voice breaking. "Give her back. Please." The creatures laughed, a high-pitched chorus that filled the air with a sound so shrill, so unnatural, that it seemed to tear at the very fabric of the night. The ground shook again. And then, as if the forest itself had swallowed them whole, the figures were gone. It was only then that Ethan realized they weren't alone. Something else was watching. A figure, tall, thin, cloaked in shadows, stood at the edge of the clearing. Its presence was suffocating, its eyes glowing with an intelligence that felt ancient and malevolent. The air around it crackled with energy. "You shouldn't have come," it whispered, the words sliding into Ethan's mind like a poison. "What are you?" Ethan gasped, his throat tight with terror. The figure smiled, its teeth sharp and pointed like those of a predator. "We are the Watchers. We are the children of the moon. And now you are ours." The air grew colder as the figure in the shadows stepped forward, its form becoming more defined as it emerged from the depths of the night. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, his breath coming out in quick, shallow gasps. He tried to speak, to demand answers, but his voice felt strangled, as though the very air was pressing down on him, making it harder to breathe. The figure, tall, impossibly tall, loomed over them like some dark sentinel. Its face was hidden in the cloak of shadows, but there was something about its presence that felt ancient, malevolent, and far beyond human. Ethan could hear a faint sound coming from it, like a soft whispering, not of words but of thoughts, sickening, fragmented whispers that gnawed at his sanity. "Please?" Ethan croaked, his voice breaking under the weight of terror. "Who are you?" The figure tilted its head slightly as if considering the question. It took another step forward, its feet making no sound on the ground. Ethan could see now that its eyes, if they could be called eyes, were not eyes at all. They were black voids, empty yet full of a consuming light. They seemed to drink in the very essence of the world around them, leaving nothing but a cold, hollow emptiness in their wake. "We are the Watchers," the voice echoed in Ethan's mind again, cold and echoing like a death knell. "We are the children of the moon." Laura took a step back, her hands trembling as she clutched Ethan's arm. "The children of the moon," she whispered, almost to herself. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with recognition, as though something deep inside her had been awakened. "No, it can't be. Not you. The figure's smile widened, showing rows of sharp, black teeth that gleamed in the darkness. Yes, it said softly, almost lovingly. We are the ones you were warned about, the ones you feared in the shadows. And now you see us. You see what we are. Ethan could feel his stomach churn, a wave of nausea crashing over him. His mind reeled, trying to grasp the impossible situation unfolding before him. But the more he tried to understand, the less he could. The figure's presence was suffocating, its very being a paradox, something that existed in between realms, between what was real and what was not. Why are you doing this? Laura asked, her voice barely a whisper, her hands still tightly clutching Ethan. Why take Ellie? The figure's lips curled into a smile, but it was a smile that had no warmth, just a sickening emptiness that made Ethan's blood run cold. Ellie, the figure murmured as if savoring the name. She was always meant to be ours. The children of the moon are always drawn to the light. We take what is ours, what belongs to the night. Ethan's mind was racing. What did it mean? The children of the moon? What did they want with Ellie? He turned to Laura, his eyes frantic. We have to find her. We have to save her. Laura shook her head slowly, her eyes haunted with a fear that seemed to run deeper than just concern for their daughter. You don't understand, she whispered. You can't save her. She's already gone. Ethan's chest tightened. What do you mean? She's still out there, Laura. We can find her. We can get her back. But Laura's face twisted in grief. No, not like this. Not after what they've done to her. Ellie. She's become one of them. The children of the moon, they take more than just the body. They take the soul. The light. The very essence of who they are. Ethan's thoughts splintered. He looked back to the figure standing before them, watching them with its unblinking eyes. The thing was alive, but it wasn't human. It wasn't even close. There was no compassion in those eyes, no understanding, only an insatiable hunger, a void that would never be filled. What do you want? Ethan demanded, the desperation and panic flooding his voice. The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, it reached up and pulled back its hood, revealing its face, or at least something resembling one. The face was gaunt, the skin almost translucent, with veins of dark energy swirling underneath, like black tendrils reaching for something unseen. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, as though the very depths of space itself had found a home in them. We want what was taken from us, the figure said. The light. The purity of childhood. The innocence that you humans so carelessly destroy. The children of the moon are not born of your world. We are the forgotten ones, the ones who have been waiting for the right time. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The right time? Yes, the figure answered, its voice low, almost sympathetic. The time when the veil between your world and ours grows thin. When the moon rises full and the light spills across the land, the children come. And they take what they are owed. What do you mean, what you are owed? Ethan's voice shook with fear and frustration. You're just monsters. The figure's smile grew wider, its mouth stretching impossibly far, revealing rows of sharp, needle-like teeth that seemed to glimmer in the moonlight. You humans, so quick to judge. You think we are monsters. But we are merely hungry. And we have waited long enough. The ground beneath them trembled and Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The forest, once silent, now hummed with a strange energy, the trees swaying as though something unseen was passing through them. Ethan felt it too, a heavy, oppressive presence pressing in on them from all sides. Suddenly, the figure's hand shot forward, faster than Ethan could react, grabbing hold of Laura's wrist. No! Ethan shouted, lunging forward, but the figure's grip was like iron, unyielding and cold. Laura gasped, her eyes wide with terror as she struggled in vain. Ethan, help me. The figure leaned in close to her, its mouth opening wide, revealing rows of gleaming teeth. You cannot save her, it whispered. She is already one of us. Ethan's vision blurred with rage. No. Let her go. In a burst of desperation, he swung the flashlight, smashing it into the figure's face with all his strength. There was a sickening crack, but the figure didn't flinch. It simply let out a low, guttural laugh that echoed through the forest. You cannot hurt us, mortal. You can't even comprehend us, it said, its voice dripping with amusement. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure released its grip on Laura and stepped back, fading into the darkness of the trees. Laura collapsed to the ground, her breath shallow and panicked. Ethan rushed to her side, pulling her into his arms. We need to go, Laura whispered, her eyes wide with fear. We need to leave this place. It's not safe here, none of it is. But Ethan couldn't move. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the shadows at the edge of the clearing, where the creatures, the children, were still watching. And as the moon hung above them, casting its cold, pale light on the world below, Ethan realized with a sickening certainty that the nightmare had only just begun. The moon was a sickle in the sky, hanging low, casting its silvered light over the woods, eerily still. The wind had died down, leaving a silence that pressed against the world like an invisible force. Ethan's hands trembled as he helped Laura to her feet, her pale face drawn in pain, her eyes wide with a terror he could not begin to fathom. She had seen something that had shattered whatever part of her mind had held on to sanity. "We have to leave," Laura repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "We have to go. Now." But as she said the words, a sickening realization settled over Ethan's chest. He looked toward the path that led back to their house, the dense trees stretching on both sides, whispering as if beckoning them deeper into the night. He couldn't feel his legs. The blood in his veins had turned to ice, and every step they took away from that clearing seemed to pull them further into the unknown. "We can't leave without Ellie," he said, his voice hoarse, strained. "We can't. I won't leave her to them." Laura shook her head desperately, her face contorting with a mixture of grief and terror. "Ethan, you don't understand. You can't save her. She's gone." The words sliced through him like a blade, but he refused to believe it. He refused to accept it. There had to be a way, there had to be something they could do. Ellie was still out there, still alive, still their daughter. He wouldn't let her become one of them. "We will find her," he said, determination flooding his voice. "We'll bring her back. I won't leave her." For the first time since the figure appeared, Laura looked at him, not with fear but with something else. A sort of acceptance, as though a part of her had already given in. But it wasn't resignation, it was something darker, something far worse. "Ethan." Her voice trembled. "Do you hear it? The calling?" He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Listen," she hissed, her eyes wide as she gripped his arm. "Do you hear it?" At first Ethan heard nothing, only the wind, the rustle of trees, the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. But then, just as Laura said, he heard it. A soft, distant sound, like a lullaby carried on the breeze, a song so sweet yet hollow that it sent chills down his spine. It was faint but undeniably there. For a moment he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. He couldn't tell where the sound was coming from, but it felt as if it were coming from the very air itself, as though the wind was whispering something just out of reach. And then the realization hit him. It wasn't the wind at all. It was the song. The song of the children of the moon. Laura's grip tightened, her knuckles white. "It's her," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's Ellie. She's calling to us." Ethan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. His daughter. Is Ellie calling to them from the shadows? Without another word, he grabbed Laura's hand and pulled her toward the sound, the strange melody guiding them forward through the woods. The trees parted like curtains and the path ahead became more treacherous. The ground underfoot seemed to shift and twist, as though the earth itself was trying to swallow them whole. It was as if the forest were alive, aware of their intrusion, its ancient roots reaching out to trip them, to stop them from continuing. "Do you hear it louder now?" Laura asked, her voice barely a whisper. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, but there was something else in her eyes too, a dark understanding, a resignation. Ethan nodded, his own breath quickening. "Yes," he said, his voice raw. It's getting stronger." The deeper they ventured into the forest, the louder the song became, until it was no longer a faint melody, it was a sound that filled the air, a haunting lullaby that crawled into their bones, pulling them forward, dragging them towards the very heart of the woods. The trees seemed to bend toward them as though they were being watched by unseen eyes. The ground beneath them was soft, like mud, and the air was thick with a strange mist rolling in from nowhere. It clung to their skin, sticky and cold. Laura stopped suddenly, gasping for breath. Her eyes darted around, her pupils wide with panic. "Ethan, we can't go any further," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's too dangerous. They know we're coming." But Ethan, driven by the gnawing need to find Ellie, continued forward. "We have no choice. We have to keep going." He heard her protest behind him, but he couldn't stop. The pull of the song was stronger than any fear. It wanted him to come closer. The thought of Ellie, his little girl, his baby, kept him moving forward, even as a part of him screamed to turn around, to run, to leave before it was too late. Suddenly the ground before them split open, revealing a dark cavern beneath. The song was louder now, vibrating the very air. It seemed to come from deep within the earth, as if the forest itself were singing. A faint light flickered in the distance, dancing like will-o'-the-wisps, beckoning them closer. Ethan. Laura's voice was a harsh whisper, panic creeping into her tone. We're not meant to go down there. We shouldn't. But Ethan was already moving, his feet carrying him toward the abyss. The pull was irresistible, a magnetic force that seemed to control his every step. He could see something moving in the shadows below, something that looked like figures, small, childlike silhouettes, writhing and shifting as though they were waiting for him. He reached the edge of the opening and looked down. The light was bright now, bright enough to illuminate the cavern. And what he saw nearly made his heart stop. Ellie was there. She stood, her small figure glowing under the light of the full moon, her face pale and expressionless. She was staring at him, her eyes empty, hollow, like the very thing that had once been his daughter had been replaced by something else, something wrong. Ellie? He whispered, his voice breaking. Ellie, it's me. Daddy. Please come back. But Ellie didn't respond. Her lips were slightly parted, her body swaying as though she were caught in the lullaby's rhythm, a puppet on invisible strings. And as Ethan watched, horror gripping him, he saw the figures around her. Other children, pale and translucent, their eyes wide and vacant, their faces frozen in perpetual longing. The children of the moon. They reached out toward him, their hands skeletal and cold, as if beckoning him to join them. They whispered in a language he couldn't understand, but their message was clear. They wanted him to stay. Ethan, you have to stop, Laura cried, now beside him, her hand on his arm. You can't save her. She's one of them. She belongs to them now. Ethan turned to her, his face pale with disbelief. No. I can't leave her. I won't. But as he reached out toward Ellie, the air grew thick, oppressive. The figures around her began to move, slowly at first, then faster, until they were circling him. Their eyes, empty, soulless eyes, fixed on him, and for the first time he felt the true weight of their presence. They were not just children. They were something ancient. Something far older than humanity itself. She's ours now, a voice whispered, low and guttural, coming from all directions. And you will never leave. The ground beneath Ethan's feet began to crack and shift, the forest closing in around him. His heart pounded in his chest as the cold, dark hands of the moonlit children reached out to take him, pulling him into the depths of the abyss. And then everything went black. The blackness enveloped him like a thick fog, smothering every sense until all that was left was the pounding of his own heart in his ears. Ethan's limbs felt heavy, as though he were submerged in some viscous, unnatural substance. He tried to move, but his body refused to obey. The darkness seemed alive, twisting and curling around him, pressing against his chest, making it hard to breathe. But then, as if the fog itself had eyes, there was a sudden light. Soft, dim, almost like the faintest reflection of the moon's pale rays, casting a cold glow across the space. Slowly, Ethan's vision began to clear, and he found himself in a place he could not comprehend. The ground beneath him was no longer solid earth. It was a smooth, black surface, like glass but darker, reflecting the distorted shapes of twisted trees that stretched high into a sky he couldn't see. The air was thick with a damp, rotten scent, like something long dead, forgotten by time. The sound of distant whispers filled the air, faint at first but growing louder with each breath. As he stood, struggling to find his bearings, Ethan saw something move from the corner of his eye. He turned quickly, and there, standing in the shadows, was Ellie. Her figure was indistinct, barely visible in the eerie glow, but her eyes were unmistakable. They were wide, empty. Hollow. Those eyes that had once held warmth and love, now empty, drained of life. Her pale face was expressionless, like a doll, and she was staring at him with an unnatural stillness. Ellie, Ethan's voice cracked as he took a hesitant step forward. Ellie, it's Daddy. Please come back to me. But Ellie did not respond. She didn't even blink. Behind her, a low sound began to grow, a sort of hum like a low-frequency vibration that made his skin crawl. Ethan's gaze shifted, and he saw that the shadows around him were moving, warping. They were shifting into forms, some hunched over, others tall and thin, their limbs unnaturally long. They were watching him, eyes glistening with malevolent hunger. These figures were not human. They were something darker, older, beings born of the night. The hum grew louder until it became a chant, a soft, haunting lullaby that seemed to crawl into his ears, filling his head with images of things he could barely comprehend. Figures danced in his mind, twisted faces, ancient ruins, the feeling of falling through time, through space. The song, it wasn't just sound. It was a force, a presence, something that could bend reality. Ethan staggered back, his hands gripping his head as if trying to block out the voices, the sight, the feeling. He couldn't breathe. It was as though the air itself was pressing in on him, suffocating him. But in the midst of the agony, one thought cut through the chaos: get to Ellie. Ellie, he cried again, his voice desperate. He reached out his hand, fingers trembling, his mind frantic with the need to save her. Please, Ellie. Come back to me. But Ellie did not move. She was frozen, her eyes fixed on some point far beyond him, as though she couldn't see him at all. As though she was trapped in a place he couldn't reach. And then, slowly she began to fade. Her form became transparent, her body dissipating like smoke, drifting into the shadows. No! Ethan shouted, lunging forward, but he was too late. She was gone. For a moment, everything stood still. The whispers, the chanting, the eerie hum, it all stopped. Silence. And then, from the deep, dark expanse of the forest-like abyss, a figure stepped forward. It was tall, taller than any human should be, its long limbs bending in unnatural angles. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but Ethan could feel its eyes on him, piercing through him as though it could see every corner of his soul. The air around the figure seemed to shimmer, distorting like a heat wave. Welcome, Ethan, the figure said in a voice that was not a voice at all, but a deep, reverberating whisper that filled the very fabric of his mind. It wasn't a voice that came from the figure's mouth, but something deeper, something ancient. You've come far. Too far, perhaps. Ethan's heart slammed in his chest. He took a step back, but the figure's presence was oppressive, crushing him. He could feel its coldness seep into his bones, draining his strength. It wasn't just a creature, it was something more. Something that had existed long before the first man set foot on this earth. Who are you? Ethan managed to ask, his voice shaking. The figure tilted its head, and for the briefest moment, a glimmer of pale light from above illuminated its face. It was not human, nor was it entirely monstrous. Its skin was gray, stretched tight over its skull, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly fire. The face was devoid of any real emotion, yet there was a deep, ancient knowledge within its gaze. I am one of the keepers, the figure said. The ones who guard this place. The ones who guard the children of the moon. Ethan's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? What have you done to my daughter? The figure's lips parted, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Your daughter is no longer yours, Ethan. She belongs to the moon now, just as you will soon belong to it. The children are the chosen ones, chosen by forces far beyond your understanding. You've come to the heart of it all. And now, you must face the truth of what you've sought. Ethan's breath hitched. His mind raced, but nothing made sense. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His body was heavy, like lead, as though the very air itself had become a weight that crushed him. The truth? He croaked. What truth? Where is Ellie? The figure's voice was almost pitying. The truth is that you are already too late. The children you seek are not lost. They are reborn. They have become part of the moon, part of the cycle that is beyond life and death. You cannot take her from us. Ethan's chest tightened, his body shaking with rage and fear. No, she's my daughter. I won't leave without her. You can't have her. You won't take her. The figure raised its hand slowly, and the air around him began to hum again. It was cold, as though a storm was gathering. You think you can fight fate, Ethan? You think you can escape the pull of the moon? You are nothing. You are just another soul lost in the darkness, another pawn in a game played by forces far older than you. Suddenly, the ground beneath Ethan's feet began to tremble. A low rumble echoed through the cavern, and the air was filled with an unbearable pressure, as though the very fabric of reality was starting to tear apart. The whispers began again, but they were louder, more frantic, filling his mind with 1,000 voices, each one calling to him, beckoning him to join them. And then, through the chaos, a voice, familiar, heartbreaking, cut through the noise. Daddy, help me. Ethan froze. The voice was Ellie's. He whipped around, his eyes scanning the shifting shadows, searching for any sign of her. And there, in the distance, barely visible in the mist, was a figure, small, pale, and glowing with an unnatural light. It was her. It was Ellie. But this time, as she reached out toward him, he saw it. Her face. It wasn't her face. It was something else, something twisted, her features distorted, her eyes wide and empty as though she were no longer human. And then the figure, the keeper, spoke again, its voice filling the air. It's too late, Ethan, it whispered. She is one of us now. She will never be yours again. But Ethan wasn't listening. He couldn't. Not when he saw his daughter, his Ellie, staring at him, reaching out, her face pleading. He stepped forward, pushing through the thickening mist, ignoring the voices, ignoring the chanting, ignoring the fear. He would save her. No matter the cost. Ethan's heart was pounding in his chest, blood roaring in his ears. Every step he took seemed heavier than the last, the shadows pulling at him, trying to drag him into the darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. But he couldn't stop. He couldn't leave Ellie behind. His mind raced. The figure, the keeper, had been clear. Ellie was no longer his. She was a part of the moon now, a creature of the night, transformed into something beyond human comprehension. But no matter how much his heart twisted in pain at the thought, he refused to believe it. She was his daughter. And no curse, no force, no creature from the depths of the world could change that. The mist around him thickened and he pushed forward, the glow of Ellie's figure growing brighter with each step. He could hear her voice again, distant but clear. "Daddy, help me." Her voice, once full of innocence and joy, was now a hollow echo, a cry from a place beyond time, beyond reason. But it was still her. And he wasn't going to lose her. He reached out, desperate, and as his fingers brushed the mist, it parted. And there, standing before him, was Ellie, no longer the little girl he remembered but something other. Her eyes were wide and hollow, her skin pale, like the surface of the moon. The glow around her flickered, like the last remnants of a dying star. "Ellie," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible, his breath shaky. "Please, come back to me." But Ellie's expression remained unchanged. She tilted her head, almost as though she didn't recognize him. Her lips moved, but the words that escaped were not hers. "You cannot take me back, Daddy." The voice that came from her was cold, alien, not Ellie's at all. "I belong to the moon now. I belong to them. I can never go back." Ethan fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. His mind was spinning, torn between the love he felt for her and the dreadful truth he had to face. He had to make a choice. The ground trembled again, more violently this time, and the shadows around him surged forward, stretching toward him with cold, cruel fingers. The keeper's voice echoed in his mind once more, an unnerving whisper that seemed to come from all directions. "You cannot save her. The children of the moon cannot be taken back. She is no longer yours to claim." Ethan's hand trembled as he reached out toward his daughter. His heart felt as though it were breaking in his chest, but he refused to let go. "I'll find a way," he said, his voice cracking, his resolve solidifying. "I'll always find a way." A shudder ran through the air, and Ellie's pale, glowing form began to flicker, her face twitching with something like fear, or was it sadness? Was it even possible for her to feel sadness anymore? For the first time since he had entered this nightmare, Ellie's eyes focused on him. For the briefest moment, something familiar flickered in them, a trace of the little girl she had once been, a brief, fleeting glimpse of her humanity. "Daddy," she whispered again, this time with clarity, with recognition. "Please, don't follow me." But it was too late. The keeper's form loomed behind her, its long limbs stretching, its shadow spreading across the ground like a dark wave. It reached for Ellie with a hand that seemed too long, too twisted, like a claw. With a cry of desperation, Ethan lunged forward. He reached out for his daughter, and the moment his hand touched her, the air exploded with a searing light, a blinding flash that left him gasping, vision flickering. In that instant everything changed. The light faded and Ethan found himself standing alone. The mist had cleared, the shadows gone. He was in a vast, open field under a starless sky. And in the distance, in the farthest reaches of the horizon, he could see the outlines of a small house, a memory from his past, perhaps. But the pain was gone. The suffocating weight of grief had lifted, and for the first time since Ellie had vanished, he felt peaceful. He looked down at his hands. The glow of the moon had faded. The forest, the keeper, the creatures of the night, they were all gone, leaving behind nothing but the stillness of an empty world. And then there came a voice, soft but clear. "Daddy." It was Ellie's voice again, but it wasn't hollow, it wasn't distorted. It was her. He turned, and there she was, standing in the distance, glowing softly in the moonlight. Not as the creature she had been, but as the little girl he remembered. Her eyes were full of warmth, love, and life. The moonlight did not taint her now, did not claim her. "Ellie," he whispered, running toward her, his heart soaring. "Ellie." And as he reached out to her, she smiled, genuinely, like she once had. The darkness that had consumed her, the curse that had taken her, was gone. She was free. "I'm here, Daddy," she said softly. "I'm safe now. I'm home." Ethan embraced her, feeling her warmth, the familiar sensation of her presence. The pain, the fear, the doubt, All of it vanished in that moment. There was no more darkness. There was no more keeper. There was only love. Only peace. And as they stood together under the moonless sky, Ethan finally understood. The children of the moon were not lost forever. They were waiting to be found. This story is a work of fiction,